Our warehouse staff definitely was wondering what the heck we were up to today. But really, for those who don't know me, my name's Tom Nardacci, and I'm super proud to work for the Regional Food Bank. Proud to be here this evening. First, I want to thank the incredible team at the food bank for the work they put into making tonight possible. To our development, communications, programs team, Caitlin, Bethany, and Sue, and especially to our warehouse team, Deshaun, Nick, the whole crew, for letting us hang out in their workspace. Thank you. And if you come here during load and unload, you'd see a totally different place. And really the staff out here, the warehouse and drivers, you know, they're the heartbeat of everything we do. So I thought it was really fitting to have this event here, you know, in their workspace. And the pallets that are right here, by the way, this is 10% of what's going to go out tomorrow morning. So all of these pallets are going out. They're being delivered to agencies, you know, throughout our service area. Our team here is never asked to do less. And that's why we need to have dialogues like this. 49 million people in America are hungry. Tonight, 1 in 7 kids in the capital region aren't sure if they're going to have dinner. You know, and I stand here knowing that my kids have a dinner plan, right? And I'm fortunate. And that's what brought me to the Regional Food Bank. I took stock in my life during the pandemic and really tried to figure out what I wanted to do with myself and my career. And I'm so lucky to have this opportunity to work here with such amazing people, such amazing volunteers, such amazing partners and supporters. So I just feel really honored every day when I walk through these doors, and I feel really honored every day when I walk through this warehouse. Tonight, we're joined by some incredible innovators. I think it's really important that we have conversations about innovation and about disruption and the things that we need to do to alleviate hunger. I'm gonna let our moderator introduce our guests, but let me just say thank you to each of you for being here. Thank you so much, but really for the work you do every day. And someone new to this industry, I look at all of you and I'm inspired every day. So thank you so much. All of us here have common cause. And let me spin a famous James Beard quote. We have some chefs in the audience, so about food, and say it this way: the lack of food is our common ground, a universal experience. That's our common ground here, all of us. Benita Zahn is an innovator. She has helped thousands of people have new conversations about healthcare, about being well. I'd be in my mother's house or my family's house, and Benita would come on the air, and everyone's just full attention what Benita's saying. And Benita would tell it right, and she would tell it straight, and she'd tell it like it is. And she would educate people and talk to people in their living rooms and inspire them and force people to have conversations about healthcare, you know, conversations that families would never have. She made it okay to talk about. Right? Think about the impact that she had and has had for all these years in talking about healthcare. Tough conversations. Thank you, Benita. And with that said, you know, an amazing force, a wonderful person, and I'm just so happy you could be here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Benita, and you do what you do.
Thank you very much. In fact, there are some folks here who I saw earlier today. It's a busy day here in the Capital Region for events that are supportive of things here in the community. But when Tom reached out to me, I had no doubt that I would say yes. And I tell just a quick story. There's a family that I've known for, oh goodness, 30 years. And back then, when someone had needed a lung transplant, they did lung and heart. And we ended up making this family wards of the state so that they could get their health, he could get the medications. 2 young children, wouldn't allow her to work. It just changed their lives irrevocably. They'd had a home, no more. And in order to keep her children fed, she had begun kiting checks and got caught. So I wrote a check and I called supermarkets and they took care of them. But at that point, this community wasn't as well connected, as strong, and as smart. So they didn't know where to turn. And now that has changed. And I don't know how many of you run, but during the pandemic, there was a group out of Syracuse called One New York Challenge that arranged for runners, and God bless, we ran 30 miles a week. I was crazy. But we all made a big donation so that food pantries in particular would have food for families that really were caught short, because we all know what the pandemic was like. I'm going to introduce our guests right in a moment, but first I just have to give a shout out not only to Tom for organizing this, but to Dominic Pernomo for having made sure that so many in this community were fed when it looked like they wouldn't be, when the world had shut down. So Dominic, to you and the folks who work with you. Angels do walk among us. So let's get to the show at hand. Now, I got to tell you, I'm going to set this right over here. They sent me big bios on these fabulous people. And I saw Dr. Denise Fernandez Pelosi earlier today, and I said, if it's all right with you, I'm going to shorten it. So I'm going to start with the lady in green. We saw each other earlier, but Dr. Denise Fernandez Pelosi is the executive director of the Capital District Educational Opportunity Center, EOC. Before that, she held leadership roles in K through 12 and higher education throughout the Capital Region, served on the BOCES Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Task Force, worked as a director for career and technical education for Questar 3 BOCES, and it goes on and on. And the reason I wanted to make sure we talked about education is you know about the hungry children. You know what it's like for them to come to school with a growling stomach and how they can't possibly learn. So thank you so much for being with us today. Also, Natasha Pernica is with us, the executive director for the food pantries for the Capital District and the Alliance for Hunger-Free New York. Natasha has been leading the food pantries for the Capital District as executive director since 2011 and the Alliance for a Hunger-Free New York since 2023. She's got more than 20 years in the nonprofit sector and developed and implemented new programs, created growth in fund development efforts, and led strategic initiatives throughout her career. And the bottom line is Natasha has got experience in hunger relief, food as medicine, homelessness, housing, mental health, older adults, in short, everybody. Everybody. And I did something on food as health, and I immediately had an email from Natasha, and we have yet to sit down and have coffee and continue the conversation. And also with us is Reverend Amari Tanyan Santos. He is the executive director and CEO for the Schenectady Community Ministries, a pastor by vocation, a historian by training, and a networker by calling. Mari serves as the executive director, as I said, of the Schenectady Community Ministries. That's a half-century-old collaborative of faith communities in the greater Schenectady area, seeking to address the social, financial, and political injustices that emanate from and perpetuate systemic poverty. And I think that's sort of a key here, is that this is not, hunger is not a one-off. It wasn't just that this family that I told you about, it was, they were already on the edge, and it took just one thing to put them over. So I want to sort of throw it out in a roundabout way. All of your programs, and I may have just set that up, how do these programs, what do they address? What's the root that they are addressing? and then how the work that happens in the community complement it. So I'm throwing this out like the first pitch at the ball game. No Mets, no Yankees. It's good. We're safe. And have at it.
I'm going to do speaking first so I can get the 10 points for participation in class. When Schenectady Community Ministries began 56 years ago, it was about children, the elderly, and housing that these 12 churches turned into the more than 50 in the greatest Schenectady area now serve. Some 40 years ago, food became somewhat a plan of it. And it's a long history, but you still talk to folks that were tethered, 30, 40 years ago with Schenectady Community Ministries, and everybody will say that food was never in the cards for Schenectady Community Ministries. And I say that because food on the doing is what we do. We're the largest food pantry in Schenectady County. We also manage 2.4 acres of urban farmland and also run the summer meals program for the city of Schenectady and Rotterdam and Scotia. The question around why is it that we do food and how is it on the face side that is our response from the face side. What I always like to say is that if food is something that a family or an individual does not have to worry about on a day-to-day basis. You come to Schenectady Community Ministries, to our food pantry, you can receive 50 meals at the worth of food. That varies according to pantries, up to twice a month. If twice a month, you can get a week's worth of meals, and you don't have to worry about that. Use your SNAP funding or any other form of nutritional assistance to be assisting you in additional food. What kind of brain space, what kind of wallet space would it open for you to address the other challenges? Because indeed, food is only one of many expressions of poverty. If you're seeking food, you have more than one issue that is usually reflected around poverty. So it's about opening that social, that mental, even that spiritual space for you to be able to have autonomy in dealing with the greater issues you're facing because of systemic poverty. But the second that I'll say is that poverty has very little to do with whatever line the federal government decides poverty looks like, right? The folks needing food assistance are way above the poverty line. And how do we, again, open those spaces for folks to be resilient and for folks to be creative is what we do. And for Schenectady Community Ministries in the not-for-profit environment in Schenectady, we partner with others in order to provide those wraparound services, but food is a way of saying, here's one less issue for you to address. Go out and be creative in dealing with this, and let's bring the community along in helping you as an individual, you as a household, deal with this issue.
Thank you. So again, I'm Natasha Pernica from the Food Pantries for the Capital District. And first of all, I wanted to start with a very basic description of what is the Food Pantries for the Capital District, because I don't know if Tom Nardacci has found this yet, but people in the community are constantly confusing food bank, food pantry, food bank, food pantry. And I think most of you probably know, but there might be a handful here who don't know the difference. So I thought I would just start with what the heck is the difference between a food bank and a food pantry for anyone who doesn't know. This is the food bank. We're here at the food bank. And the easiest way that I describe it is this is like the wholesaler, and the food pantries are like the retailer. So people, individuals and families in need of food, go directly to food pantries in their neighborhoods. And the food pantries get most of their food from this amazing food bank, which is an incredible resource for us. The Food Pantries for the Capital District is a coalition of the food pantries. And then this year, we also started a statewide coalition of food pantries called the Alliance for a Hunger-Free New York. The food pantries was actually started in the late 1970s. At that time, most of the pantries were operated out of faith-based organizations, and it was really about coordinating the services. That was before we had a food bank, and so it really was based on food drives, and we didn't have the institutions that we have now to move the food in a logistic and organized way. We didn't know when government food was coming. We were trying to figure out where can we store this food and distribute it. And so our organization helped coordinate the services, and that's something that is really true to the work that we still do today. A lot of shared services. We move a lot of food from the food bank. In fact, last year we moved 3.2 million pounds of food off the docks directly to the food pantries, who are 50% volunteer run. I don't know if anybody here has ever tried to put 1,000 pounds of food in your car. We did that once with our minivan at work, and we didn't do that again because the minivan was not very happy at us. So we're able to take the palletized food orders and move them directly to the pantries so they can unload them. But we do a lot more than that, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But I hope that helps understand where we fit in. We're here to fill in the gaps, support the food pantries, and really speak on behalf of those needing food assistance and elevate it so that we can make system-wide change. I guess the one other thing I want to mention is because we don't get much government support at all. And so a lot of organizations are afraid of speaking truth to power, so to speak, or doing advocacy. And because we're largely not government supported, we try to tell the hard truth. And over the past decade, people say, Natasha, how are you going to end hunger? And I'm like, this is how we're going to do it. Today, our member food pantries are going to give someone 3 to 5 to 10 days worth of groceries so they won't be hungry today. But that's not good enough. Number one, how we end hunger is through living wages. For any of you familiar with United Way's ALICE report, it's Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed, as Amari touched on this, there's approximately 40% of our population that either is working or in poverty that just doesn't have enough money to just get by on basic needs: healthcare, food, rent, childcare. They're not going out to the movies and going and skiing. 40% of our population, and that's where. So you've got living wages, number one. Number two, strong federal nutrition assistance programs. And the number one anti-hunger program is SNAP, which is formerly known as food stamps. People can shop at a regular grocery store like you and me, pick out exactly what food items that work for their family, what their kids like to eat, what their cultural preferences are. If you can't make enough money, then let's make sure you can go to the grocery store. And then what happens? When you don't have any more money, when you're not making enough money, when your SNAP benefit is only $28 a month, you turn to the food pantry system. That's all you have left. And many of you, honestly, how many of you in the crowd run food pantries? Raise your hand. You guys are doing, Angela, raise your hand. I see you out there. I see Jane's out there. Raise your hand, Jane. There's food pantry members here today, and they're the ones on the street day in and day out getting food today. And so we couldn't do it without the food bank having this major resource for us to get food out to the people.
I can remember when food would show up in the before the pantries. It would be a place in Schenectady, and there was cheese, more cheese than you could imagine. And I don't even remember, maybe it was pasta, and families lined up to get this. I want to move the conversation to the next step, because Natasha did a great job along with Amari about what it is, who's getting it, but you find a whole nother population that a lot of people don't see, don't imagine.
That's right.
Right, students.
Right. Thank you so much. So at the Capital District Educational Opportunity Center, we're a division of Hudson Valley Community College. We see the students who have traditionally experienced barriers to education. These are the students that did not have a traditional education the way we did. They might have started in school, but they had a terrible experience, so they dropped out. Or maybe they went to college and couldn't afford it, so they had to stop midway. Or maybe they got pregnant and their family became a priority. These are folks that are related to us. These are people that we see every day. They're some of our colleagues. Many of them are hungry. These are non-traditional. It's not the visible poor. We call them the poor in plain sight. They're the people sitting right next to you in your cubicle at work. So these are the folks that are looking for a second chance, not a leg up. They're not looking for a handout. They're looking for a second chance and a way to be able to persist. It's hard to go to school as an adult. It's even harder when you have a family. And if you have to worry about, well, after class, I have to go grocery shopping, and I don't even know if I'm going to be able to make rent, and I don't even know if I'm going to have money to put gas in my gas tank to get from school to work to, home. Those are all of the barriers, and those are things that many of us take for granted. So at the Capital District DOC, we've made this a priority in every way. We've put our money where our mouth is. So everything we do is about removing those barriers. So for food insecurity, for example, we formed a great partnership here with the Northeastern Regional Food Bank. We have a food pantry at both of our locations, at our Troy EOC as well as our Albany EOC. And we are packing 2 bags of groceries for all of our students every single week. In addition, our culinary program, that is learning how to cook, is preparing lunch for all of our students every single week for free. So those are 2 simple ways in which we're addressing the food insecurity. But then there's all of those other barriers, and we're all addressing them in our own way. So the transportation, we give all of our students a free CDTA bus pass, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's not just for school, it's for life. Because if you can persist and be successful in life, you're going to be successful in school. We make sure that all of our students have access to mental health counselors. We have 3 of them at the Troy EOC. Mental health is a priority, food insecurity, transportation. We're starting a free drop-in child care center sponsored by the Capital District YMCA, one of our best partners. Free for our students so that they can drop off their child, go to class, and not worry about having to find a babysitter or pay for a babysitter. So when we talk about, these needs, and SNAP is only so much for each week, it's removing all of these barriers so that the people that we work with, our students in our programs, our clients, it allows them to be successful. And this is how we're going to be able to solve this crisis of not being to fill our jobs. If we can have folks persist at work, at school, and play, it'll improve the economy overall.
You referenced barriers that are out there, but there are barriers for a whole nother population, and that's the population with mobility challenges. And that's something you're addressing, Natasha.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we did prior to COVID is, there are people who have transportation barriers, there are chronic illnesses and other health conditions, there are single parents with multiple kids. I have 3. Taking them to a grocery store is difficult. If you don't have a car, how are you going to get that food home and your 3 kids? So the transportation aspect, getting people to and from pantries or home delivery grocery before the pandemic was really hit or miss. It was really largely based on calling a pantry and they'll be like, oh yeah, I have a volunteer driving home that way. They can take the pantry grocery. And during COVID, when the shutdown happened, is when people weren't leaving their homes, and how the heck were we going to get them food, especially people who didn't have resources to pay for home delivered groceries and things like that. Honestly, we couldn't have done it without Tech Valley Shuttle. They volunteered during the shutdown to home deliver pantry groceries. They were a lifesaver. And Albany County and Schenectady County stepped up and actually provided COVID funds to our coalition so that we were able to systemically respond to everyone who was under COVID quarantine and didn't have resources for groceries. And once we started being able to do this in a way in which it wasn't hit or miss, but we could actually respond to everyone who could not get to a brick and mortar pantry. It was incredible because we were reaching people who would have gone without any resources. And that was definitely, if you think about it, prior to the pandemic, our food access referral team did about 1,200 to 2,000 referrals a year. Last year, our referral team made almost 9,000 referrals here in the Capital Region. 78% of those referrals required home delivery, pantry groceries. This is a big challenge, though, because the contracts for COVID has ended. The greater community doesn't recognize that hunger is actually still a crisis right now. In fact, more than 80% of the pantries in the capital region are experiencing increased service levels this year over last year. And last year we had record-breaking numbers. So we're really trying to raise awareness that, yes, you're not seeing the long lines of people on the news anymore, but the lines are in fact even longer than they were now. And there's less funding that's going out to the pantry system. So we're left with, how do we continue this critical work, doing more with less?
And that brings us to the work that Amari and Sikkim is doing. A lot of changes providing mobile pantries.
Yes.
Not just getting people to the pantry, but basically bringing the pantry to them.
In partnership with the food pantry of the Capital District, not only did we start doing deliveries, those deliveries opened up for us in Schenectady a whole population we were not serving. Over 70% of the people that we were serving in deliveries were new people to our system. So not only people that would have gone without, it's people that would have never known of pantry services, had in response to the pandemic, whether it was because of sickness or other forms of access, knew that this was a service that was available to them. Because of that, we started having other conversations around the city and the county, and started figuring out if people cannot come to Hamilton Hill, where we are located, right? And we couldn't expand our service hours because that would have required a whole different ordeal around the operational cost of opening on Saturdays or being open longer. What would be more efficient ways for us to be closer to communities? That opened up a conversation with the Schenectady City School District as they were thinking their community schools model. And that opened up a pilot at the Martin Luther King School on Hamilton Hill, 3 blocks away from where our food pantry is, to see if this was something that after school at the pickup, parents would do. On the first day, we showed up with 15 bags. Those 15 sets of food for students was gone in 30 minutes. 2 weeks later, we show up, 30 were gone. Today, we're partnering with the Schenectady City School District at 8 of the 11 elementary schools, and we're averaging 40 deliveries. So these are 40 families at each one of these schools that we are impacting. We're also partnering with the YWCA of Northeastern New York. We were having a conversation as the pandemic was winding down, with the cost of food, it was going up, and the food cost of the YWCA was skyrocketing. And I remember in a passing conversation with Kim Siciliano, the executive director, is like, you don't have to worry about food. The folks that you have housed live in Schenectady, so the residency requirement is checked off. I just need to know where they're at and how many people are living there at any given point, and I'll drop off food. We are doing every 2 weeks a drop off to everybody who they have in residency, and they can stretch out their dollars for services, and we can pick up the slack around food. It's the same thing with the partnership with the Schenectady City School District. We have the money through public and private funding to purchase the food. We only need some operational support. So the partnership that we're doing is finding finances together and tackling these 40 families at each one of these 8 schools that we are serving now. 40 families, 80% of which are new to our system, who wouldn't have known that pantry services is something them and their children can have access to and they can work through. In the shift in the most recently approved budget by New York State, HITNET funding, which is the main source of funding for food pantries, got cut. And the Weekend Backpack Program was one of those programs that got impacted. In Schenectady, which the city of Schenectady was the main service receiver of that program through the regional food bank, we started wondering, how are we going to address the gap that is going to exist because we couldn't fund the regional the Weekend Backpack Program the way it was. Food pantries, including Schenectady Community Ministries, picked up and said, we just need to know who are the schools in the communities that are most in need, when is the most efficient time, and we'll be there. So the sustainability of the mobile pantries at the school district is also bridging the gap for kids who are not going to be receiving weekend backpack programs anymore, weekend backpacks on Fridays, but now can receive 15 meals worth of food every other week for everybody in the household. So we're not only giving food for the kid that was receiving the backpack, everybody in the household is being impacted at these mobile sites.
And I think people, go ahead.
Thank you.
and how critical that is that the whole family eats for myriad reasons. If the very least is that the adult in the house then can model how to consume a meal that serves you best with the food you have. A lot of this sounds like top down, that organizations are doing. What's the upstream ability? You know, how is it possible for those living with food insecurity to reach out, and then how does that begin to shape what you do? Go ahead, Janice.
So we hear from our students, and last year when I first started, I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary with the EOC. I would hear from students that, listen, I want to be here, but I got to go do groceries. I got to take care of my kids to the doctor, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, what are some of the things we can take off their plate? So this was the one where students kind of drove the actual process. We started with the food pantry and started providing students with just 2 bags of groceries. We're expanding that now to include feminine hygiene products, which is very expensive and is not always covered by some of the public benefits. So it's things like that that we're doing to expand based on what the students are telling us. They're expressing that, you know, this is wonderful. Thank you for everything you're doing. Is there anything else that you can do? And we're being responsive in that way. Students are also, and when I say students, you know, you have to understand these are your non-traditional students. So we have 16-year-olds and we have 79-year-olds. So their needs may vary. When we provide them with groceries, we also have to be sensitive to their religious needs and their cultural norms. We know who our halal students are. We know which students keep kosher. We have to be very cognizant of that. They tell us that, they feed us that information. Now we've seen enrollment increase by 22% in 1 year. Now we've seen students sustain and stay in program 50% longer than they did before. So we're seeing the results of that. And now what I hear students tell me is, I wasn't going to come today, but I was hungry. So I came to school because they knew that that's where they were going to get their meal. So it's making a difference. And we are hearing it both, you know, qualitatively, and we have the quantitative data to show it.
And I can speak to, at the Food Pantries for the Capital District, we actually have partnered with academic institutions in the area to survey the guests that receive assistance at food pantries and ask, what are your preferences? What are your needs? The last time we did this, we learned that the number one thing that guests wish that there was more of was meat. Meat's expensive. After that, it was dairy. And then after that, it was fresh fruits and vegetables. I think what's really, one of the things when I look at my over decade of working in this industry is when we first started at the food pantries, most of the pantries did not provide fresh produce. There was a lot of even stigma about, well, people don't want to cook, they don't want produce. If I have it, people won't take it. And that consumer survey, which was a part of our Filling the Gap food pantry system and community needs assessment, really showed, no, people want to eat well, they want to cook, they want things that they're used to eating with their own traditions. And now I'm happy to report that almost all of the pantries in our coalition provide fresh produce. We have moved a really long way, but this is also an area we need to pay attention to. And I say that because back in the day, food pantries and food banks were really a push model. It was like a you get what you get, right? The government cheese, you get what you get. In fact, my own grandparents used to get food from the food pantry when I was in college, and my grandparents were like in their 80s, and my grandma, like they were used to eating particular foods, and she'd come home with this box of things and she's like, I don't know what this is, I don't know how to cook it, I'm not going to eat this. And she's old, so she's not going to learn new things. And I was in college and she's like, you take this, and I can't say no to my grandma. So I'd end up with all this food that I didn't know what to do with. And I think if I knew better, I would have given it back to the food pantry to give to someone. But we've come a long way in the food pantry and food bank world to that we're trying to really strive towards dignity and choice. And one of the things that I think we're struggling with right now is the food supply chain, with inflation and food pricing much higher than inflation average. We're looking at 10, 12% increases. Not only is it impacting individuals and families, but it's impacting the food bank and the food pantries, because it's more expensive for all of us to keep those pantry shelves stocked right now. And what we're losing with that is the quantity, the quality, and the variety and choice for the people that we've worked so hard to get to this point. And so for those of you that are here today, we have to push harder at making sure that our supply chain for the nonprofits and the community organizations relying on the food bank as a source of food, that we have access to enough nutritious quantity, quality, and cultural preferences to at least do this the most dignified way that we can moving forward.
And given that, I've got to ask, Maury, how has your pantry, all of you actually, partnered with the regional food bank for innovative ways to get the food, to make it go further, because you're stretching your dollar too.
We sure are. Two stories regarding Nourish New York. Another at the pot of funding that during the pandemic got approved and opened up a whole new world of food access around supporting local New York produced and grown food, but also allowing food pantries to increase the quality of the food that they were giving out. My response to that would be creating relationships along the food network, right? Fox Creek Farm is a CSA in Schoharie. When those were our first partners in through Nourish New York, and it allowed us to access locally grown produce that were small. They were a small enough grower that they could respond to some of the needs and ones that we were hearing in our pantry. In order to be operational, Fox Creek averages 350 shares a year. Schenectady Community Ministry, because of sustained funding from New York State and the regional food bank guiding us in how to spend Nourish New York money, represents 60 shares of those 350 that Fox Creek does. But not only are we able to partner on the top-down relationship, now we're able to open spaces of engagement between the guests that we serve and the growers to get to meet each other. So not only are our guests getting fresh and quality food that is more local, they're getting to know who is the grower that is just 40 minutes down the road growing this for them and creating those relationships. The second is also sustaining the local economy. At the Nourish New York, at the particularly HIPNAP more generally, and the work that we try to do in the network allows us also to support at the local producers. Casa Visco and Edin Viscusi is in the room. Was a second of our vendors for at Nourish New York. They are in Rotterdam, third generation at the family run, produced in New York. Half of their stuff is grown in New York, and that goes not only because they want to check off boxes that New York State requires. They're committed to that kind of work. We started purchasing Casa Visco at the sauce for our guests to provide them with high quality sauce, but also for somebody that was literally from their community. That relationship opened a whole network of relationships in Schenectady around the relationship of emergency relief organizations, which food organizations, how pantries are known, with the cooperative movements, right? Edin Viscusi and the Electric City Food Co-op are trying to put a brick and mortar at the downtown. We are figuring out together how does the charity at the food side commits and works with at the cooperative at the food side in order to continue to support the local ecosystem of food growing and food production. And in the midst of all this, people get to know not only who is consuming their products, but who is producing it for them, and they're able to shift recipes of production more quicker because of that relationship. All of that is possible because networks like the ones of the Food Pantries of the Capital District and the Regional Food Bank teaches us and guides us in how to better spend and stretch these dollars while creating significant and strong networks in the community.
Quick question. Now that they get to see who's growing for them and who's taking, has that changed growing what they grow? Are there certain things that your population says, boy, I would really like more of that, but I don't want any of that?
Absolutely. So I'm not going to mention the vendor, but there was a pasta that was readily available for at the food pantries. I mean, it was at the 100% wheat, high grains. We were getting it back like there was no tomorrow. You would go to the YWCA, and their exchange table was all this pasta, right? Our food manager calls the producer, brings it to the pantry, and gathers 10 people to give him feedback around what they're growing. They changed the recipe because this funding engagements, guided by better ways to stretch our dollars, connected the producer to the grower to the consumer and allowed for it to change. So not only do we have great quality pasta, that's what speak for Casa Visco sauce, but we also have high quality pasta that our folks will consume, right? But also get to know the cultural connections to pasta. A lot of the people that we serve in Schenectady, pasta is not our the usual carbohydrate. I'm a Puerto Rican. Rice is my carbohydrate, right? So a lot of the folks that I serve, pasta wouldn't be their thing. But having that personal connection to the grower and the producer and to cultural the competency opens up this whole the other world of relationship. That pasta wouldn't have been what I consumed, but now that I can get a pasta that I can eat, and I can get to know how is it that it's made and why, connections are multi-generationally and whatnot allows for these practices to continue to happen.
Conversation. It's great. It's fabulous.
Absolutely.
But and when that works, that's woo, right. But what are some of the greatest challenges that your organizations, you're already nodding, face, that get in the way of you achieving your mission?
So I already referenced it earlier, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this room with staffing challenges. Yeah. And if you don't have people, you can't do anything, period. So we're a small organization. We have 65 members, faculty and staff at the Capital District DOC. I have 10 open positions, and those range from entry-level positions to our senior administration. It's tough to get stuff done. So many of us are doing 2 jobs. And it's twofold, right? So we have a skills gap and a skills shortage. We have a skills gap because people have not been trained to do the jobs that we need them to do. And then we have a skills shortage because there aren't enough people. There just aren't enough people that are in the workforce. So if I can feed them and they stay happy and they stay in their program and they graduate, then I can hire them and the full circle can persist. And that's why I referenced earlier, this is how we're going to rectify our economic woes with our staffing shortages. This is just one way that we can address it. That's my biggest challenge.
I wanted to add something because I was actually talking about this with my team because our immediate response is, we need more money, right? But I'm like, but I wanted to really, yes, sing it, sister.
Green is good. Now, beyond that.
But
Natasha.
beyond that, I really wanted to try to be more thoughtful about what is the challenge. And I think in the food pantry system, there are so many factors that contribute to people needing food assistance that are out of our control that it makes it very difficult to know how many people are going to show up at my pantry door today. Is it 10 families? Is it 50 families? How much food do I need to order from the food bank? What are the food preferences of the people that I'm serving going to be this week? It really ebbs and flows. Some people might only have to turn to a food pantry a couple times because they have a short-term hardship. Other people come to a food pantry 2 times a month. Some pantries right now are serving people every week because their SNAP benefits are so low. So I think we were really thinking about like so many things that are out of our control. And I want to talk about just to illustrate it is that, we've got 65 to 70 pantries. In 2019, the pantries in the Capital Region provided food to about 64,000 people, right? 64,000 people in the Capital Region were visiting our coalition members. During COVID, that was just a big show. I don't want to cuss. I don't know if any of you. Sorry. Those of you who know me know that I say things colorfully. But it was a show, and so our stats aren't quite exact. But we went from 64,000. Guess what happened when the federal child tax credits, the emergency SNAP allocations? We went from 64,000 people visiting food pantries in 2019 to 2021, 51,000 people. There was a huge drop in people who were visiting food pantries because the federal government stepped in. And guess what? Those people had enough money that they could shop at the grocery store. What happened next was federal assistance ended because we were back to normal, apparently. And also inflation hit hard. So we went from 64,000 to 51,000 to 70,000. We're worse off now. And like I mentioned earlier, 80% of our pantries are seeing increases. Our service levels are about 15% higher than last year, year to date. So we really are in a crisis right now. And so the challenge is really these things that play to the demand are really out of our control, and yet we have to be responsive because we are the last place where people can turn to.
And it's a funding challenge, but it's also a policy challenge, right? The government considers food pantries and soup kitchens emergency food relief organizations, EFROs. You would presume that the people that we serve are people that have one or two offs, trying to figure out, and then they go out of the system. At Schenectady Community Ministries, I mean, the sheer numbers, of our own pantry in Schenectady, 700,000 meals in the past fiscal year, over 40,000 visits, right? Half of the people that visit the pantry, any one of the pantry initiatives at Schenectady Community Ministries, come at least once a month. So we are not providing emergency relief. We are the main source of food to some, 3,500 to 4,000 people in the city and county of Schenectady. Policymakers need to understand that the way funding is made available to mostly buy food might not be addressing not only the operational costs, which are significant, think staff, think gas, think the distribution. There are many other services that go along providing the food service that could be addressed at food pantries throughout the Capital District, that if we don't start changing nomenclature and understanding the long and midterm the policy impact, we will continue to keep skidding. We need to move from this constant responsiveness to the food issue to actually start addressing what are some of the core causes of the poverty and poverty-related circumstances, and food being one of the main ones, touching so many aspects of well-being and resilience in our community.
Many of you may have caught the story some time ago about a woman who was an adjunct professor, and she was working at 3 different universities, sleeping in her car, didn't have enough money, and ended up very poorly because she was so tired. Wasn't eating, couldn't sleep, working around the clock, couldn't make ends meet. So, we always think this is it's the other. It's not. As you pointed out, you all have, it's us. It's not the other. And for many people, it's a paycheck and a big bill away from the need. So much of the community outside of this fabulous crowd is not aware of the great need of the folks who are affected or of how to get involved. This isn't a way like your Shark Tank, share with them some thoughts, some things, because I know, you're sipping your Coca-Cola, you're all talking and saying, if we could only get them to do. This is these are your foot soldiers.
So one of the things that we did early on this year, our back to school event, was to take all of my faculty and staff to volunteer at the Patroon Land Farm. The Patroon Land Farm supplies this food bank with the produce. I needed my people to see where that food comes from. So we literally harvested 1,000 pounds of cabbage. We had to do that by hand. We had to bring that experience, that visceral experience, full circle. And it resonated with everyone. It's like, okay, the light bulb went off. It's like, now I get it. Now I know why we're doing this. That's one way. We have food can drives every single Thursday at our school. We do that by design. So our cosmetology program, you could come in, you could get your hair done for free, but you gotta bring canned food with you. That's how you pay to get your hair done at our cosmetology program. And I'm not shy. I ask people for donations constantly. I didn't see any of my friends from Samaritan Hospital in St. Peter's, but they just deposited $10,000 into my food pantry account here at the Northeastern Regional Food Bank, specifically because I asked them. I said, look, they said, where's your greatest need? I said, food. Our students need more food. I want to expand to feminine hygiene products. I need to expand into Albany. In Albany, I have more halal and kosher students than I've ever seen before. I went on and on. They're like, okay, we'll give you money for your food pantry. So those are ways that, organically, those are the different things we can do. We're going to sponsor an event. So the future events that we sponsor from now on, we're asking people to bring food with them or make a donation. Everything will be make a donation to our food pantry account.
Great. And I have a little bit different approach as we're a coalition of food pantries, because I think the way that we get through this and the way we get through this now, but also to the other side, is twofold. One is local, right? We've talked a lot about cultural appropriate. There are, in our coalition, there's 70 food pantries, but there's even more than that in the Capital Region. We really encourage people to talk to their neighborhood food pantry and ask them, what do you need? Because they might have guests that come that have different needs, that maybe things aren't always in stock at the food bank and they have to go to the grocery store to buy them because they have special, populations or asylum seekers that, they have special needs. So, or maybe they need money because they're running short and they have to pay rent and they don't have enough money for rent. Like the food pantry has to pay rent. Or they need volunteers to do the home delivery. So if people want to find their food pantry in their own neighborhoods and ask them directly at thefoodpantries.org, we have a map of nearly 3,000 food pantries across the state of New York. Community meal programs. Go look at the map, pick up the phone and call them and say, what do you need? Do you need money? Do you need volunteers? Do you need household, personal household products? So that's like at the very local level. At thefoodpantries.org, our map, you can find your local food pantry. On the how do we end hunger in the big picture, please, anytime you have an opportunity to talk to any of your public representatives, whether it's local, it's your village, it's your town, it's your county, it's your state, it's your federal, tell them that this is not okay. It is not okay for 1 in 10 Americans to be struggling to have food on the table. And it is absolutely their responsibility to do more for SNAP, to do more for USDA, TFAP through the Farm Bill. Right now it's Farm Bill time. Farm Bill funding helps fill the food bank with the USDA food products that the pantries can get for free. That's helped their dollars go. The more free food at the food bank, the more the dollars the pantries can spend on the other things that they need to pay for. So again, local level today, you're helping people feed themselves today. But at the big picture, we need people to be politically active and tell your public officials that they need to do more.
And reiterating hopefully what my colleagues at this said, especially around the keeping it local, we need to remove the stigma around food access, right? We need to start talking about what are the resources that exist for people to access food. We need to make sure that we know what those local access points in the community look like, because you never know when any one of us will be in need. The way our economy is set up is that most of us in this room are losing a job away or a catastrophic medical circumstance away to be in poverty and needing these services. We need to support the systems that exist and make them community owned and community operated, so that whenever we need the service, we know exactly where to go and not be ashamed of it. These are resources that exist because in the end, what we're all trying to do is make sure that students and the greater community is resilient enough, our children, our youth, and everybody in our community, in order to sustain. in each one of our communities, talking about it on the policy side, but also on the community side. These are not, the corner down the weird road in our towns. Food pantries, if you go to the map, are located we have a resilient network in the capital region. Getting familiar with it, talking about it, so that we can all be comfortable in assisting those whom we love in accessing those services, but also knowing that we can access those whenever we might be in need.
Such great information. And I also think in this time of great loneliness, when people feel so apart from each other, and that's deadly. What do they say? Loneliness raises your risk of a host of diseases equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Showing up and helping out begins to address that. You are part of something bigger than yourself, so it becomes healthy on both sides. We've got time for anyone, all of you, to ask questions in the audience. Anybody? You got three real, what my pops would have called hot tickets here. Folks who knew their stuff. Please.
So, I also am a member of CSA. Now I gotta be on stage. Awkward and weird. All right. So I wasn't expecting to be on stage tonight. Thanks. I would have dressed up if I knew I was going to be up here. So I am one of those people that's fortunate enough to belong to a CSA. You mentioned you have a partnership with the CSA. I know a big push in the banking industry for the governor was ADU units. Housing, obviously, an issue. A lot of people have land, a lot of people have water, a lot of people have electricity. What about an ADU version of greenhouses? We have extra space in our parking lot, less people coming to the office. I might have extra land. What about partnering with the CSA to teach people how to grow vegetables? You have a program set up that, hey, if you pay $2,000, we'll come set up the greenhouse. We'll show you how to set up automation for irrigation. We'll show you how to tend to these plants, and then you can donate them back to food banks.
Thank you. That's fascinating.
I mean, I think from a food system perspective, the more we can invest in local agriculture and teaching people how to do it, it will build more resiliency in our food system, which was one of the big challenges during COVID, is our food system totally broke down. I think, will it end hunger? Maybe not the big hunger, but I think adding resilience to our local food system is really important. So I think there are a lot of different ways. There's not just one solution. There are a myriad of solutions and innovations and opportunities. And especially the freight farms, the hydroponic farming, bringing fresh greens and local greens to communities is important. And I think you should start a nonprofit and focus on that.
And they're right there. Thank you. Question.
But on the policy and the funding side, also understanding the multiple intersections to be able to address locally this issue. So Schenectady Community Ministries has the blessing of managing 2.4 acres of urban farmland on 3 sites in 3 of the poorest neighborhoods in the city of Schenectady. And about 4 years ago, we moved from the parcel at the model where everybody was assigned a little plot and they did their own thing, to farming at all of our members, those farms. Our farm does not provide to our pantry. It's a separate operation. It impacted about 110 families this fiscal year in the work, but everybody gets to work in it. Everybody has access to the food that is grown there. We include egg-laying chickens and honey at the bees in the operation, and everybody gets to participate from planning in the late winter to the harvest, which we're about to go to. Last year, for some weird reason, we were harvesting potatoes through December because the weather was just strange. But everybody gets to participate, and this 110 families this year will have a connection to each other, but also to the ability of urban landscapes to be able to produce the food and sustain.
And to add to that, actually thinking more, because you're like, there's a parking lot, let's start growing things. I do believe that we should be adding food systems into all urban planning, because we can grow food everywhere. It was about 10 years ago, Habitat for Humanity was redeveloping a part in Sheridan Hollow in Albany, and that's just when the food forest in Seattle was making a big news. And I was like, can we put a food forest here? It'll be like a living food pantry. And we started the project. Unfortunately, the soil there was contaminated with mercury, and so you can't remediate, or whatever that word is. So we abandoned that phytoremediation. Can't do that with mercury. But I really love any of you here who are involved in urban planning and development projects to incorporate food systems into the planning projects. Thank you. That was it's fun to think about, and I think it's a good direction.
So I want to share that at the Capital District DOC, I'm going to go sideways just a bit, but I'll come back to exactly what you mentioned. We just started a cannabis construction program. Hold on. There is no cannabis involved. What we're teaching students is to take a shipping container and build a grow house inside the shipping container. So you know what we're teaching them? Plumbing, HVAC, electrical, and carpentry. You can grow cannabis or you could grow tomatoes. It doesn't matter. But what we're teaching students is the art of agriculture and self-sustaining food production. Cannabis production or food production. So the concept is already catching fire, and cannabis is a lot sexier for our population, so that caught their attention. We immediately got students that have been justice involved. We got students that are men of color. That's exactly who we were targeting. Now this will persist, it will perpetuate, because we got them in through cannabis, but they're growing grow houses, they're building grow houses. I don't know if it's on. Do, 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 do.
One of the things I'm going to say about, especially in the urban, well, urban and rural, but the urban areas, a lot of these projects, not only the state at the policy making, but can be facilitated at the county and local level. So we don't have to go all the way up, the advocacy line to make some of these things. It's a matter of educating local the governments to facilitate some of this and avail themselves of state available funding for not-for-profits or other organizations to be able to facilitate this for their communities.
So we got a mic. Now we got a mic that's working. Who's got questions? So that you don't have to. There we go.
So this is a bit of a self-serving question as well. So I run a mobile outreach unit for a not-for-profit. We do a lot of work in rural and remote areas. Partner with the regional food bank at times for some of their pop-up pantries. Stigma is a huge barrier for people accessing services, right? They almost would run under the cover of night rather than be seen to have access, to have needs, right? But we're all human beings, we all have needs. I would, self-serving part, would love to know some of the strategies that you've employed to help people overcome that stigma piece, right? What have been successful best practices or whatever that have really worked? Because it's something I think about day in and day out, and would appreciate hearing from colleagues about that as well.
I'm thinking of a summer meal story and one of our mobile pantry stories. For summer meals, instead of parking in awkward corners in the city and having a white van with a strange man getting off and giving out food. 28 years ago, our program started in Schenectady Community Ministries with a white dude and a black dude renting a school bus and showing up at Central Park at a weird time, giving out peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and milk, right? It was hugely successful, but really weird, right? The way that we're doing it now is that we're intentionally, in our planning, we're beginning to what are the best access points that are determined twofold. One, by local community people inviting children and youth from the area to know that there's going to be an access point staffed by people from the community, right? And also partnering with parks and other summer program providers to attach the summer meal to some sort to form of event, right? So we're at city parks where the city's running at the programming. We're partnering with the Boys and Girls Club wherever they're going to have at the programming. With the Create Studios, who has programs in both Schenectady and in Saratoga, so they can put out their art program in the place. And that's the kind of thing that we're trying to reduce the stigma of it. You're not coming for a free meal; you're coming for a full program, right? You know that would engage, you know, as full of you as a child or a youth can be. On the school district, in our mobiles, our success has been because instead of simply, you know, parking our mobile at some random time, we are partnering with parent liaisons. In Schenectady, every school that has a full-time parent liaison, and it is the parent liaison organizing the community, whether it's people that need to receive this food or people who are going to help these families with the foods that they're going to receive to taking them home, that are all coming together and making this happen, right? So the whole lowering of stigma, educating around the resources, and making sure that everybody participates in it, because we're just trying to help each other. Partner with the regional food bank around free produce at the giveaways, all help in reducing the stigmas and making these programs more successful. The community buy-in for both on both has been essential.
Natasha?
Yeah, I can speak to just another way of nonprofits getting involved in food distribution is the Food as Medicine movement. Food as Medicine movement is a national movement. It's medically tailored meals and medically tailored groceries, along with nutrition education and nutrition therapy. And the Food Pantries for the Capital District just today launched the New York State Food as Medicine Coalition, which is stakeholders, food pantries, food banks, hospital systems, physicians, registered dietetic nutritionists from across the state. We had 85 people on the Zoom call today to carry out this work that has been going on for 2 years, and we're launching. But this is a way that reduces the stigma in that if you qualify with chronic medical conditions such as diabetes and hypertension, it will be, and we're making this movement towards it being an eligible social care program that you can get referred to by your own physician. And so this is long-term moving the healthcare system to adopt new systems of care is, I want to say it's probably a decade or so long process, but we're about halfway in. I think we can do it in 5 more years. I don't know. Benita. I need to talk to Benita. She's going to help me out with this. But I think just like you're eligible for this, right? Like my grandparents were of the generation where they didn't accept help. They lived on a very limited income, but they volunteered at the community center, and that's where they picked up their food. So I think another piece to it is my grandparents were like, well, we're eligible for this. It wasn't like a handout. And they were actively volunteering, so they felt like it was a part of their community. I think a lot of food pantries are in churches and other synagogues and other religious entities because that's a part of your community, right? You're taking care of your community. Libraries. But the other thing that LifeWorks does in Saratoga County is they have shifted to a completely home-delivered model. A lot of people don't realize that there's actually a lot of poverty in Saratoga County. There's a lot of rural poverty as well. And it is really hard to make an entrance because people don't look too kindly on outsiders to some of those really difficult neighborhoods that are struggling. So it's building the relationships, it's getting out into the community in a non-threatening way. And it does take time. And that's why it's important to invest in the nonprofits that have been serving those communities for decades, because they're the ones who have the connections and the relationships. So when I talk about find those local organizations, they're the ones that are invested in that community. And that's why it's like the food bank is here. We rely on the food bank because we need this supply chain. But when you take it down to the, as I said, like retail side, they're the ones, the direct relationships in the communities. And they're the ones who know, okay, my community, okay, the firehouse, I know up in Greenwich, there's a firehouse that also operates a food pantry. Like finding in your community, where is the place that's most non-threatening? How do you frame it? And then on the other side, educating, like this isn't a character fault. This is a systemic issue. If we have over 2 million New Yorkers that can't put food on their table, it is not a character flaw. This is a policy issue and a resource issue. It's honestly an income issue that is not on the person's fault. We need to do better. So I think it's the big education on the policy and systemic, and then again, going back to those local organizations that have the relationships in the community.
Question. We'll take one more. You got to come down because I can't come to the mountain.
While he's walking, I just want to address your question about trying to preserve everyone's integrity as they pick up their food. We've made this a completely anonymous process. Students scan a QR code so that they do it on their phone. It populates a Google form. We get their name and we ask them, where do you want to pick this up? So some students say, leave it in my counselor's office. Some students say, I'll come to the food pantry at 4 p.m., which is after class. Some students say, I'll come tomorrow, Fridays, which is when school is closed. We really don't have classes on Fridays, but they'll come on Friday so that way nobody sees them. One thing I failed to mention, we've also expanded this to include our staff. So I mentioned before, these are poor in plain sight. These are the people you work with. We have staff that have now availed themselves of the food pantry, and to preserve their integrity, we ask them to do the same thing. Click on the QR code, fill it out, tell us when you want to pick it up and where you want to pick it up, and we'll meet you there. So we're going to meet them where they need it.
Thanks for letting me have the opportunity to say something. I think this has been wonderful. And I'm a longtime supporter of the Regional Food Bank and the food pantries for the Capital District. And I think we should do everything we can to raise money for them, to volunteer for them, and do all of that. But I want to get back to one thing that Natasha said. This has got to be solved by people other than charity or volunteers. We live in the richest country in the history of the world. We have billionaires spending millions of dollars to fly to the stars for 10 minutes while families live in their cars. We cannot solve this by giving more food. I lobbied this year. I hate lobbying. I had the great thing about the pandemic is I didn't have to go there and lobby for 3.5 years. But I had to this year, and I went and talked to one assembly person who I'm fond of, and they said, well, we're going to give you school breakfasts and lunches. I said, what about the elderly people like myself who can't make ends meet? You're not giving me breakfasts and lunches. You work for me. So there was 4 of us lobbying. We need 400 of us lobbying. We need every single person who has a soul and a conscience to tell their representatives from village to city to county to state to federal government, this is your responsibility. Take care of our people. We need to change this. Imagine reducing, I live in Troy, 25.4% of the people in Troy live under the federal poverty level. Imagine if we could reduce that to 15%, to 10%. So I want to know what you think. Thanks for your time.
Were you asking us, Mark, what we think? Heck yeah, Mark. So if anybody wants to get involved in advocacy, the food pantries in partnership with Hunger Action Network formed the Alliance for Hunger-Free New York. We have a collaborative anti-hunger committee that anyone who's interested in advocacy can come. It's basically a share out of all the different anti-hunger organizations. Mark mentioned free universal breakfast and lunch. There's SNAP, there's Farm Bill, there's Good Food Purchasing Bill. So all the different anti-hunger groups come each month and share out what are their advocacy priorities, and they have the letters and the links and the things that you can do to get involved. So I'd encourage everybody to get involved on the advocacy level through the Alliance for Hunger-Free New York, or reach out to me and I'll connect you.
That's just there we go. I caught an article and I was going to pull it back up that News Channel 13, I still check them out some, that they had posted, and many of you have probably heard that Equinox will not be bringing dinners this Thanksgiving. You have to go to them. They are focusing on their dinner. And I think that speaks so much to what we discussed about those who can't get there, who don't have access, to seniors, families that can't get out. So I throw that out there because that's probably going to put a greater strain on the food pantries. And one other thing, and I'm sure you all face this, is that as we move into the holiday season, people go, oh, I will give you money. I'll bring food to the food pantry because it's the holidays. People probably need a little more. I think if we don't take anything else away from this, is people always need a little more. Hunger doesn't have a season or a holiday. And in fact, sometimes during the summer months, I've learned from you all it's even worse because part-time jobs may disappear, kids aren't in school, and again, we forget, we think, well, it's not Christmas or New Year's, I don't have to show up. So this becomes an opportunity as more people come to spread the message you all brought. We've got about just a couple minutes. Do you want to do a round robin? If you've got one more thing, if there's something else you didn't get in that I didn't ask, or you all did a great job. I got to tell you, did they do a great job?
Thank you.
So, I look at the food over there and I think you asked the question, how do you get people to come up? I suppose if you always offer a pizza party, the folks are always going to say, that's okay, and I'll be there. But it's about bringing the heart. And you clearly bring the heart and the elbow grease as well. Thank you for your work. Thank you all for showing up. And all the best. God bless you all as you get out there doing this work.
Espantina with the green bag.
Ready? Roll. There we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Don't wanna stop. I 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 don't wanna stop.
No.
I don't wanna stop.